Confederate set some artillery up over here to try to soften up the Union artillery defenses, which are under there. They exchanged some fire, got a hit, but you can see they also took a hit during the Union turn. Not actual damage, just a disorder to disrupt that. There should be a shaken marker on the infantry that got displaced as well. That's the disadvantage of not having infantry in the line, is that you might get pushed back and you're more likely to fail a morale check or to have a worse morale check, because the infantry is going to probably be higher morale than the C. If you choose to put decent units in the line, Bs are higher, which I believe those are. I'm not sure. That's MH. I don't know what it is. Let's see. Probably a B. Cleburn's stuff is pretty good too. We got a lot of good commands here for the Confederates. For the Union, the disadvantage to having units on top, though, is that you're going to take straggler losses for having infantry intermingled with the guns when it gets fired on. For the Union, that's a worthwhile cost. A, because they want their guns there. They don't want them to get knocked back. But also, they don't want their guns alone up in the front line when the Confederates come streaming in, which could, it looks apparent that they're preparing for an assault. I got Bragg up here ready to give Breckenridge some individual divisional orders. Planning on sending him across the stream here to put pressure there, and then link up with the rest of his corps on the attack down the railroad and pike combination here. Their goal is really this intersection in the woods there. I figure that's a good place to go hide in the woods and make a decision where you're going to be afterwards. Basically, I sent the other Polk's corps down towards here. Again, I'm not sure they're going to make it, but slicing, I'm pretty sure they're not, which is to say that the Union units are probably strong enough, given that they have defensive orders, to actually stand against this. I'm throwing weight against weight here. The reason being, well, the goal of this game is largely to cause casualties and to push the enemy back and grab terrain. Grabbing terrain that the enemy can then maneuver around and get behind you or something doesn't really help. So you really do have to go with the frontal assault in this kind of game. And I've got the advantage right now, until that stack comes in at least, whenever that. In some ways, these periods where nothing's much happening are my favorites in something like CWB. You get to see the potentials, you get to think when the units are imagined, perhaps. When units are marching about, for example, here, or preparing for the attack, how the attack will happen. When it gets down to the mechanics of actually watching the attack happen, well, that starts bogging you down in rolling the dice on the tables and watching it all happen. And then afterwards, when units are kind of recovering, there's still a lot of mechanical action to take place. I really enjoy these battles where there's a lot of time. 7 days was one of them, even though I only got through it in 4. And the armies were pretty damn wrecked by then. It's these lulls that I really enjoy, the overnight where I picture what happened during the day. You don't get that in the shorter battles, and it's very pleasing here. Got some artillery duel going on across from Wayne's Hill down to the Union here. The reason the Union's concentrated here is they've got 2 guns aiming up here. This hillock here is causing real problems at hitting that gun, and that's one of their concerns. Also, the terrain they're in, the wooded terrain, makes it difficult for them to shift their guns around effectively. I'm kind of looking at the possibility that I may have to collapse my center back this way if the attack happens before those units come on. I've got new units coming on, though, here at the 9:30 turn. I don't know what the hell they're doing. That's going to be the center, and it's got orders to move to the Corps headquarters, so it'll help with the defense there. It comes in an entry hex D as opposed to B, though. I don't know where. That's all the way back here. Doesn't have orders of how it should get there, but the cleanest way is right up to here, and then I can reposition them. It makes more sense to do that than the tactically more sensible moving up around here onto the Wilkerson Pike. Now, this is so often the case in this game. The moment for the attack seems to have passed. The Union, both units, this one didn't have to roll anything, but this one is coming in at this point. Big old force. We got Sheridan here. He's got some high quality stuff. Not huge, but decent sized units. That'll be enough to prevent this flank from collapsing at all easily. And the rest of the right wing of the corps is quite hefty. Some artillery fire didn't really do anything. Actually, no, it did. We took out a second gun here for the Confederates. So they're down to 3. That's problematic. That's no longer enough to get a point of firepower. Now, if I bring this one up and this one into place and move this one across, perhaps, then I'll still have 3 guns hitting that key location. And, well, it's possible that I might be able to get some shots in from back here with that shaken gun at closer range. I'm not sure. 1, 2, 3, 4 hexes for a 3 gun. I got to get within 3 hexes for that to do anything more than just be plinking, and plinking isn't really worthwhile. Don't know if the Confederates are going to start moving, but if they don't do it soon, the opportunity will have passed. At this point, there's still a little bit of time before those units come up. But then after that, whatever numerical advantage I had is gone. And then, oh, here's the other problem. Breckenridge started his attack. So unless I get initiative or something and call this all off, it looks pretty ugly to me right now. Just in terms of hitting reasonable forces. And since I have everything planned and ready to go, you know, it's almost yeah, you got to go with it. These are the kind of moments this game excels in the whole series. You got Polk and Hardy unwilling to move because they're hinged on Polk, but Breckenridge slowly crossing the river, obviously beginning an assault. The Union troops coming up. The moment has passed, as we've got, yeah, that's Sheridan, not Sherman. Still quite good, obviously. Pushing their way into place on the line to where there's not going to be any exciting outflank or anything going on there. Almost wish I could call the attack off. Things got kind of bloody real fast. Breckenridge comes slamming in. Now there's cannons under here. The Confederate artillery, and I've shifted some using detachment to up here so I can maintain 3-point fire on there. Actually took out another gun there. Disordered a unit. And some more casualties here, but probably the most exciting thing is Van Cleve. He was a 4-rated leader. Bang, wounded, out of play for the rest of the battle. One of the Union's best leaders on the board here. I mean, they have a number of decent leaders, but that's the kind of thing that you want in command of one of your brigades. That's a serious loss. Probably more than the casualties that good old Breckenridge took here. He took 4 casualties on his advance, and a handful of straggles, like 4 straggles as well. Whereas the Union, the left corps, has taken a total of 4 straggles and 1 casualty, the one that took out Van Cleve. They also lost a gun, though, which is 2 guns. They got a big hit on them. And that'll push us over into the Union turn. And no, nobody's moving. Think of things when I remember to say them. I made an initiative roll on Breckenridge, which he failed, no loose cannon, nothing like that. But with the intention of, hey, can I throw some kind of proviso to delay this attack? Like, wait until they move forward. It wasn't in my initial written orders, but essentially by getting initiative, you can write new orders for yourself. And those new orders can be essentially the same, but with that little timer aspect in them. I didn't want to put the timer in because once I start putting timers in based on other people, it's not clear to me when I'm allowed to take action. And I feel like the procrastination should be in place. I shouldn't be able to actually even roll until they get their orders. And that all becomes complicated. Do I have to see them moving? What's going on? So I just kind of wanted to avoid that internal debate with myself and wrote the order and figured, well, I know Polk's at D1. I don't have to worry about him. He'll come around. Well, he didn't come around yet. I'm also a little concerned with Polk's forces because the way they're spread out, I just don't feel like I have the right to start moving them, even though I do by the rules, until I have those orders. I mean, I would if they came under attack or something, but I don't have the right to start shifting forces around. I feel like I should, though. I should pull the artillery up and such not, and have that aid in the softening of the line. So I don't know. The Union turn, you can see where Breckenridge hit the line. He's really deformed it. We had the disorders before I shifted the 2nd Division of the left wing into place there. And one unit was routed. Others were thrown back. We're getting a real mess there where Breckenridge is going to have a chance to push in. He may make it back to his corps no matter what. The heavy artillery support is helping him somewhat, but he's taking definite losses in doing so. We saw most of them the last turn. I don't think much more added this time. And he's not doing all that much in the way of casualties to the Union. It's just really bad morale checks for the most part that's breaking things up. And Polk gets his ass in gear and we see the Confederates march forward to engage. Now, this is just after movement. The fire combat hasn't happened yet, so we'll see whether or not they get repulsed from this initial attack. But Breckenridge is now pretty much under Hardee's command. I can remove his individual orders. I'm leaving this gun here and inching these guys forward just because of the, well, some holes might open up if some morale checks are failed there. Always a good idea to keep your guns as a supporting element, especially when they can concentrate fire like these guys can. The moment after the assault, this guy down here disordered was protected behind the lines far enough. Confederates could have pushed further and gotten some shots on him to get the advantages there, but taking, trying to pursue one unit like that and taking risks, pushing yourself into a gap generally is a really bad idea in this case because you'd get enfiladed all over the place. There just aren't enough troops to push down there. So the goal is pretty much to collapse the main part of the line. And, well, not a lot's moved. One Confederate got shot out of the line, but for the most part, it's just massive casualties, especially on the Confederate side. But the Union's taken its share as well. When you have two good, solid forces smacking into each other, the casualties are going to be high because everything's rolling on at least the 3 to 4 table and probably higher. The Union has some artillery interspersed in there, which was able to do some additional casualties. Onto the Union turn, and they'll just fill in this line down here and pretty much try to stave off any possibility of success by the Confederates. It doesn't look terribly promising to me when you're doing a head-on assault against something that's well defended like this. We'll see. Sometimes, a line will collapse, but chances are the attack's going to fail, at least overall. We'll see. And the right wing has gotten into position here. I sent McCook over to go have a chat with Rosecrans about what the hell to do. I figure if I can swing him into play, that can only come out the better, getting more of my forces engaged. No reserves. So, in a lot of war games, reserves don't matter at all. And in this one, they largely don't. Which is to say, if you let your units all become so run down that none of them can conduct an attack, that is a minus. There's no question about that. But if you're engaging the entirety of the enemy force, well, the problem is, say your line breaks here in the center. You have nothing left to throw into place. However, if the enemy gets an overall advantage in terms of total firepower that he's throwing out at you, he's more likely to break you. Reserves can serve a purpose, but they don't serve any kind of really extraordinary purpose in this game. Seeing a fresh group, a fresh unit come charging in after you've just brushed aside one, or the like, doesn't have any special effect to break your enemy, the enemy there. So, in some ways, it feels like there should be some kind of rules for it, but very few games take advantage of that. And in this one, actually, there is a little bit more, because, yes, once a unit gets run down, it isn't effective on attack at all anymore. You can push an enemy back with a good reserve if your own line kind of starts to crumble. However, to me, it seems more important to get those flanking maneuvers going than it does to keep a significant force in reserve. And honestly, when you're talking about a core operation, you may be able to pull units back and recover them from combat and make them into something like a reserve where they're able to be thrown back in again. So there is a little bit more than there is in a lot of games. There's just no real advantage to keeping something completely fresh, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe if I faced somebody who managed to keep reserves, they could prove me wrong. But usually they're more a matter of, well, the orders didn't get there. Nobody moved when they were supposed to. Confederates are definitely taking a hammering, especially Hardee's corps here. They're just, wow. Nothing's wrecked yet, but they're sure on their way. The Union managed to shove some Confederate guns, or some Confederate troops up here, opening lines of sight for the guns, which could both actually fire through that little gap, and that caused more problems than the unit that was there would have. But of course, you want to fire at your enemy when he's available. Now, I actually noticed this one unit marked optional. That unfortunately is in the line of battle. It was one brigade. It's worth one victory point. I'm going to charge the Confederates with that point. The battle itself is sort of ahistorical in that I'm allowing Bragg to make his move at the early point of the game, so I don't think it's terrible to have some extra Union troops having slipped in there. I'll try to remember to charge them the point for that. I've thrown most of the optionals over into here, but this had already had some effect on play, and I just don't see not leaving it in place, trying to fix that in some way. Played it without the optionals before. I think that one slipped in quite often because it looks like it's just part of this command. And I don't see the optional the way I do when a whole division is essentially optional. As we reach noon on the first day, you can see the Confederates have gotten pushed back in a number of places. They're beginning to show some serious toil on their units. Three brigades wrecked. The Union actually has almost as many. Yeah, they have 4 brigades wrecked, one of which is that optional one that it's just tiny. It melted away. It's completely wrecked. Probably be better off without it, just because of the points it's going to give. More bloodletting through the noon turn, and Breckenridge's little division is getting pushed aside, so it's no longer really in command here anymore under Hardee. I can't trace through that. The push forward by the Union has kind of cut things, and I think Breckenridge is going to have to pull out and try to come around and join in on this attack. That's not a terribly good sign, but he could use the time away from the battle, to tell you the truth. The Union is running out of ammo locally. Both sides have infinite amounts of small arms ammo, as is usually the case. You can see a couple low ammo markers for each side, but the Union's expended a lot of ammo this turn, which of course means they rolled very high on the 11 to 12, which causes casualties. So they did a lot of damage too. They've got a couple that they haven't been able to recycle, but that's not the big deal. The big deal is that their wagons are running low, at least for the center and the left wing, and they're going to have to pull them back near Rosecrans's command and resupply them, which could create a period where there maybe are low ammo markers for a little while, but that can happen anyway just by the nature of things. If you fire on your if you fire on your turn and don't have a wagon right near you and end up low ammo, which is what just happened to the Union here, then you're going to be going through 2 more firing phases in that low ammo state, but that's not too big a deal if Breckenridge has to withdraw here. It seems pretty certain the Confederate attacks failed here at 1 o'clock. Breckenridge pulling back, like I mentioned, to try to get back in command. He had no way of easily pushing his way through. I would have given him leeway to try to do so, but basically he had 2 options and he made the choice to pull back. That's actually probably giving up a victory point area, the Waynes Hill area here, if they're not careful. In addition, you can see they kind of had to peel back to defend against that, and they're just not making any headway against the Union line while the losses are just accumulating. Not that they're not accumulating against the Union too. This isn't a game that really terribly favors the defender, but with the artillery interspersed, it does. Although as you begin to fall back, your artillery starts to have to unlimber a line back. One of the big advantages, the kind of interior lines, I guess, that the Union has, allows them to shift troops from one place to another, so they're less likely to become too disorganized in their positioning. Lots of ammo expenditure on the Union side, fixed in terms of, we got this supply wagon out now. This one's been supplying things, but I got a new one. Of the center wing wagon is refilled, coming up on a straggler recovery turn, and we have a few units that are completely out. Those obviously can try to recover, and also things like the left wing here has a section. I don't know how much of that got shot up, a little bit over Van Cleve's side of things. Leaders are dropping like flies. You can see all the wounded. No one dead yet. All right. Well, good old Polk decided he had too much, and he's pulled back, doing some straggler recovery here. That's actually on Hardee's units, but that's just the destroyed unit. This was a failed corps attack check, and now we got Breckenridge pulling around the back. I tried to make an initiative check for Hardee because the ordering is such that you can try to mitigate a corps attack stoppage by trying to see what they're doing and say, okay, not gonna suffer that. The roll didn't succeed. No loose cannon or anything, but Breckenridge is continuing his attack, but he's kind of mellowed it out a little bit. He's still in small arms range. He's got to pretty much stay there. But he's not charging in with all his units, doing this as heavily as possible. Basically, his figuring is his artillery is probably probably his strongest point right now. He's outgunning the Union artillery over here. The Union's largely driven a big gap through Hardee's core there, I guess. With Polk not attacking, with Hardee's units pretty badly mauled. He took the brunt of the hit with the Breckenridge command pulling back. There's hardly an attack going on anymore, but it's enough to keep pressure so that the center couldn't really do much straggler recovery. This is gone. And I probably ought to move this somewhat closer. But over on the wings, I was able to largely recover, except for in this area here. You can see some new holes opening up in the Union line from the artillery, but the Confederate artillery got pushed back too. You know, I mean, when an attack ends, it kind of peters out like this. We're not there yet where the Hardee hasn't given up his command yet, his orders yet, but it's bound to happen. He just doesn't have the force to punch his way through and win this battle. To 2 p.m., the Confederates have been pushed back a little bit more. Now, they have to keep coming in to some degree or another. And not suicidally, obviously, but they don't have to throw their disorganized units on the front line. But they have to make some reasonable attempt to continue this attack. They can't just sit back here, which would actually no longer be qualifying as an attack. And well, that's just one of the problems that you face with the command system in this game. Personally, I like it, but it's one of the things that makes it difficult as a player. There's not a lot of, brilliant strategic decisions in a game like this. Something like 7 days, you have more room to maneuver on the map. This is a fairly tight map. The battle lines kind of draw themselves for you. You've got positions like this, and up here on Wayne's Hill that are kind of a little extended now. We've got Rosecrans over here. He's gone to talk to the pioneers. He wants to send them up to Wayne's Hill, get some enfilading fire from up there. How good that's going to be, it's hard to tell, because Confederates can just unlimber their own artillery and probably get rid of his artillery. And it's only really the artillery that has any effect. A bunch of infantry standing up there does nothing, at least a small amount, because I could send a division out there to clear it fairly easily. That's not a big unit. The decision that I had to make was, can I afford to send one of my wings up there? And I felt no, because the center has moved down to here. It's so weak. I've got the right wing already moving. I need something to anchor my position. And having that river cut the left wing, for example, just would not work well at all. That was a possible thought, but I think I'd rather just set this up as some kind of rather small threat to the Confederate position, maybe forcing them to fall back or to do something about Wayne's Hill itself. Stressed in a number of these videos is the amount of foot dragging you allow in following orders is really a very personal thing. And two players playing opposed kind of have to be on the same wavelength about it to get this game working well. Now for me, I'm going to show you kind of, this is the extent of what, and it may be going over the line in my view, but the extent of what I'm doing. Hardee's command, I have an attack order still. This unit I've moved up into small arms range. Everything else has problems, either disordered units or out of ammo. I just don't think it's reasonable that I would commit things in that shape to the firing line. At the same time, Breckenridge, actually, I don't think this is violating anything at all. I can just move the Breckenridge leader into place and I'm in good shape. But his command is not moving forward to fully rejoin the rest of the corps. In fact, I had to check, where's my headquarters here? 1, 2, 3. He's within the legal boundaries of what he should be doing. But it feels a little fuzzy. I've paused him and I'm recovering stragglers in column formation. I'm just moving more slowly to try to catch them up as far as I'm concerned. I'm not taking full advantage. The game would make more sense maybe if... see, it makes sense to me that a formation could be marching in column more slowly to pick up more stragglers at about half rate. You know, that's what the every other turn straggler recovery, which feels like a fake mechanism, but it's present both here and in the RSS. It's not a, we're plopped down and doing nothing. It's a, we're doing nothing every other turn for deliberate reason. So that I feel like one should have some latitude in making that decision as well. Just a couple of thoughts about the whole situation to show it. Right now, I think I've taken my fire back and forth. The Confederates still have the artillery advantage over here, although the Union are using some of their guns to plink off some of the straggler recovery. Again, that doesn't mean that I'm concentrating a lot of fire there over the course of one little half-hour period. It means over the course of the last hour, I've been firing every now and then to disturb some of the straggler recovery, some of the ability for those units to reform a little bit, I guess. You got to take some level of abstraction with any game you're looking at. So we move into 330. Breckenridge, Hardy. Breckenridge is his subordinate, has kind of pushed forward a little bit. He's still under this attack order. He's recovering what he can, but, you know, he feels like he has to push the attack a little bit more than he has now that he has no good excuse not to. Yet he's received orders that tell him to call it off, essentially, to fall back to a defensive position kind of across the line here. The Union also, no new orders really taking place except the Cav has attached itself, and this may not be legal to Morton's Pioneers. Essentially, I'm looking at it as a follow and do what they do. I think the Cav operates on its own special brigade orders, essentially. You can use them from the headquarters. So it may undergo its own, if it's wrecked, it may have its own stoppage, flinging it back out of command, essentially. And then it'll just head back to Rosecrans and await orders there, but if it's wrecked, it's not going to be of much value anyway. It's just one small, weak brigade, right? The 1-1 Cav. Yeah. Low morale. Not that tiny. Confederate attacks actually have had an effect. Some small arms fire have been going into the left and center. The left has to check for defensive failure. The center hasn't had to. Still won't. They haven't. Oh, yeah, they had a wrecked unit. They should have checked, too. They're less likely. They probably would have failed. Oh, well. But anyway. I rolled a damn 3, which is what I rolled on the left. Now, Thomas is a lot better. But, yeah, that 3 would have succeeded because of the -2 for defensive failure. He needed a 2 to fail. Anyway. Crittenden failed, and his left wing had to pull back with a emergency corps retreat. Basically, his corps marker went back here. Crittenden himself went to go talk to Rosecrans about the situation. Hey, my men aren't holding. What should I do, man? And Rosecrans is going to tell him, well, hold the new line, I guess. And we'll see if he can get his order under success before Hardy manages to shoot at him. The next 2 turns are free if he doesn't get orders. If he gets orders, he has a slight chance of failure, as he did before, which is basically he needs a 4, I think. Yeah. He's not quite badly enough hurt. He needs to have all 3 wings destroyed to go down to the next level. Or if Crittenden himself ends up wounded, that'll count as an extra division hit. Anyway, he had to fall back, and I pulled back the center wing in order to smooth out my line. Unfortunately, that left the center wing flag, not out in the open like that, under this unit, which routed and then recovered partially. But yeah, between the 2 of them, that's a pretty potent hit, because now if the Confederates are able to step on this flag, well, for one thing, they'll be in range. They could shoot out the supply wagon, which if they get a hit on it, they destroy it. And that would take away, some of the fighting capacity of the center wing. Other wings can support it with their supply wagons as long as they don't have any low ammo markers on their own. So it's not an absolute killer thing, but it is a heavy problem. And I could also move my army supply up there, but that's really risky. I forgot to move this. The roads here, supply wagons, unless this game is different from most of them that I've been looking at recently, travel on the secondary roads at 1 movement point, which means they're not terribly quick. The army supply can't leave that. Anyway, the situation looks rather scary. Of course, Hardee could fail his own attack stoppage check and have to pull back at any moment. He's not in anything like good shape here. I think everything's wrecked for him. No, Breckenridge is still one box away from being a wrecked corps there. But, Breckenridge from being a wrecked division, which would make the corps be all wrecked, which takes things to a higher level. Hardee's a good enough leader that's, I think, around a 6 that he needs, which, it could happen at any point. Anyway, you can see that ground being given, and where the Confederates can kind of gain something. What's it all worth? That's hard to tell. If you're not doing a coordinated assault, it's pretty hard to take great advantage out of a collapse. I mean, and this collapse, this is why I say defensive collapses aren't that big a deal. The only place where they're a big deal is where you're holding amazing terrain. If you're holding really good terrain, like a sunken road or a hill crest or something like that, where you get some serious bonuses, then it's a big deal to have a core failure, a defensive failure. And that's a time when, you have a reserve unit in play who has orders to take up that position, perhaps, in the case of a failure, but it's hard to get those orders into play at the right time. You have to have either timed orders that say, hey, when they fall back, well, when's that going to be? So that's kind of a problematic situation with it. So the reason I like it, though, is basically it's for Gettysburg, it's for Thunder more than anything else. Down there, of course. It's the only way you can really dislodge the Union off of Cemetery Ridge or Culp's Hill is a core defense failure. I like that opportunity. I like the opportunity of being able to move people. And without it, it's just, you basically have to wipe the entire unit out, or else they will stay up there and fight forever. And that just feels a little unrealistic to me. The risks of it in most of the games are pretty low, and I actually like it even in the... I want to have it in the games where it's explicitly forbidden by the system, but, well. Anyway, I probably should just play with it, but I have trouble overcoming that. I'm like, man, there's a real reason they have this, but usually it's really not that painful to have a core failure. And you can see it coming and swap a fresh core into the defensive line there and intermingle it in such a way that when one core fails, the other one's right in there and able to help defend. So with careful planning by the defender and enough reserve troops, you have no problem holding things as long as you're kind of careful. Anyway, yeah, let's use careful a lot in that sentence. As you can see, we're getting close to the end of the night, or the end of the day, which pretty much will probably mean the end of fighting for the day until the next morning. All right. The target wasn't quite as easy as it looked. The zones of control that are there meant I can't enter this hex without going from one zone to another, and you have to stop immediately upon entering a firing zone. So no easy step on the center wing headquarters and force it back. However, I am making my push forward because, hey, I'm still attacking, it seems. Better fire managed to clear the obstacles. Now this was a straggler recovery turn, and the heavy push onward is really reducing my chances of recovering stragglers. On the other hand, it's also cutting deeply into the Union ability to recover stragglers too, because I've got units within 3 hexes of them. Plus I'm knocking their morale around and stuff. So continuing the attack, it's not that terrible a thing. It's not going to gain me much. The Union's going to have to throw some forces forward, and they're iffy forces, things like shaken units that are likely to get pushed back in order to defend the wing command there. That effect may be the safest thing for this Union Corps headquarters here. I shot the unit that was in it out, disorganized it, but 2 other units moved up into place. I can't go from zone to zone. The only thing I'm allowed to do is close combat. If there had been units there, I would have been able to do a close combat charge. Actually, the PRBH, well, yeah, not very good chance, because it almost certainly would take casualties doing so. And once it's wrecked, it's probably not going to stay in the hex. But this is the one result where I cannot possibly, well, that's not entirely true. I could close combat one of these other units. If it breaks, then I can use the remainder of my movement to step on the wing marker. I don't think I'm going to do that. I think I'm just going to keep putting the pressure on. There's no particular great advantage to pushing the center back. Even if the wing marker moves back, it's just a matter of disengaging those center wing units out of close combat range. Whatever fallback I'm taking, I'll still be able to keep the line in command where it is. That's one of the factors, is even when you get the emergency corps retreat, you're in a position where you can pretty much hold the same line you were at before, just because you can keep everything in command from the 8 hexes or whatever back. I think it's 6 to 12 hexes you have to withdraw. Well, 6 to 12 movement points, which sometimes can be significantly less. I assume you don't have to use road movement if you don't want to. The left wing, though, got its orders. So it's no longer in that weird no order stage, which is cool, because this is probably the last turn I'm going to do tonight. And otherwise I'd have to remember, I can stand there one more turn, but then I have to break again if I don't get my orders. Nothing else is getting any. It got an immediate acceptance, actually. Oh, I gotta throw him over to his headquarters. He had to walk there for the unit to get its command. But you got this low ammo unit. I probably want to pull that off the line, replace it maybe with this one. It's going to be a hard slog forward, and there's always the chance that the command just collapses, the order collapses. And Hardy's forces were able to push back the Union a little bit more, but still not take that the headquarters for Thomas's headquarters. Well, the Union's getting more serious about holding the position and have shifted in some fresher troops. Quite often I just get in the attitude of, I'll put the nearest thing that looks okay, but I was able to find a couple of units here and here that are in pretty solid condition, especially since it looks like I'm facing fairly solid condition Confederate troops here. That's not entirely true. One of them, for example, is no longer A size. And then this. McCook finally decided to take his orders into account and start marching. Now, next turn is the beginning of the dusk, the lowered visibility, and we're almost at night. Night attacks are an interesting factor in the game, in the sense that when you launch an attack at night, both sides have a better chance of a core failure. There's a minus to morale check, so you're going to take more stragglers. Minuses to the core attack stoppage, so it's more likely you're going to fail. But this is really the biggest thing where defense failure actually has an effect. It's more likely. So there's some possibility that the attacker, on the turn he hits a crippled unit like this, will break it immediately. And I think Polk is still pretty... Well, actually, looks like he has nothing wrecked. He was never wrecked. But, yeah, it has some definite effects. It reduces range to 1, but it has an effect on the fire combat table to reduce the casualty levels. So it's like this whole mix of effects all put together, and it's hard to tell what'll really happen in a night combat. Now, here we are in the 5 p.m. turn, and the Confederates continue their push against the center wing. And they smacked into where the headquarters is with a fairly decent shaped unit with an actual melee attack. Took a couple losses, inflicted a loss, wrecked the unit that was under there, but unfortunately they didn't manage to stay in the hex, and they've fallen back, which means these guys don't have to make a morale check. Of course, now they get defensive fire against a disorganized Confederate unit, which will probably finish that poor thing. Here's what happens when a unit keeps following orders for too long. Now, some of it, of course, is, yes, I was pushing a little harder than I should, given that there was an opening there. Confederates get to shoot back and rally, and even some straggler recovery, at least for this stuff back here. And after the Confederate firing, you can see that wing's open again. Just keep throwing Union units in, trying to hold it in place, not for any particularly great reason, except, well, it's probably costing the Confederates more than the Union. It's hard to tell. It's bloody as hell, but this last turn definitely, with the Confederates really trying to push towards it. Plus, the further out here I am, the better things are for this swing that the right flank is making. It's got a long stretch. We may have to extend lines to be able to get the kind of outflanking maneuver we want. Of course, Polk can fall back and extend his own line and anchor himself at the river. But we want to force that. We don't want to just charge forward into the woods and hit him. We want to force him to spread his forces out too a little bit. Recall what I said a little while ago, earlier this morning, I think. I've taken a nap since then and put in a day's work, so I'm a little tired. But the penalty for night core stoppage doesn't affect the defensive orders. But there is still a penalty for regular morale at night. So you can still gain area against weaker units more quickly because of the poor morale for units at night. So it is still some sort of trade-off. Anyway, I'm back around to doing the Union turn. I've done almost nothing today except work and then go back to sleep. Well, the Confederate Hardee's Corps failed their core attack stoppage check as we enter the twilight turn. No penalty for that, just a visual penalty, in which case we only had one firing opportunity from the Confederates into the stack, some artillery that slid back. We lost some guns. I had to limber up guns that the Union had actually managed to move right up next to. That had provided them with a lot of problems, actually. They charged right up into where the advance was in order to try to secure this position. You're allowed to do some level of attacking and defense if it, appears to improve your line, I guess. I did notice something horrible. I haven't given any orders to Polk. Now, he did not receive any small arms fire last turn. He chased away the one Union unit that had gotten close enough last turn. And it's possible he may be able to evade the bullet, but I had to send Bragg over to give him some kind of defensive orders, or else he's only able to stand 2 rounds of, or 2 turns of small arms range fire, which isn't that much. It's possible the Union could maintain their attack during that. All right, well, after this turn, I think we'll be loading this up because it's a long video, and I was hoping all the attacks would be done and we'd just be running through the night turn, which is pretty much going to all be straggler recovery. But with the Union Army moving, there's going to be some more going on. Now, some bad morale checks almost gave the Confederates another free pass for Polk's corps. He should have had orders long ago, but 2 of the units marched up to here. They both got repulsed. This one was shaken, this disorganized. They recovered during the rally phase, obviously. This one, though, managed to drive that back, and they've actually taken some fire. So that's 1 round of fire taken upon them. This is also the last round that we're going to see artillery fire coming from the Confederates. They don't have orders to get any closer. They were, during the Confederate turn, they were able to fire. They haven't been able to this turn. And that's about the line of it. I don't think I have any artillery down here. Anyway, we're heading into night. We got an attack swinging here that almost failed its check anyhow. Right? I think it was the left that almost failed. He's a 0 at the good level. He needs a 4. He rolled a 6. He's gonna need a 6 when nighttime comes from now on, which means this attack's only gonna go so far. It's probably not gonna succeed in accomplishing anything. On the other hand, Morton's troops here have a fairly good chance of being able to chase that cav off Wayne's Hill and set up some artillery, and that's going to cause some serious problems where I have to probably pull Hardee back a little bit. I have flexibility to do that because his corps command's here, and he's sitting without any orders. He can pretty much do whatever the hell he likes as long as he stays in command and doesn't take any fire over any time. All right, this one's going up. We got a couple of, just want to point out, we got a couple of stranded units like this guy's guarding that road. We'll see if that comes into play later in the day, or tomorrow actually. Remember, this is 4 days. It doesn't have to be. It would probably make more sense to start it on the 31st with the setup there and go with the historical thing. But, this is close enough to the historical that I don't feel like I'm playing one of them really souped up what if type scenarios like often show up in some of them, like the Perryville game. It's barely a game without using the what if scenarios, right? Well, this one you've got a pretty good battle either way. All right, up it goes. One more thing to talk about is ammo, actually. We're under 100 for the Confederates. They've used up nearly half their ammo. The Union was at 200. They've used up actually more ammo. Both sides don't really have enough left for 3 more days of that kind of fighting. On the other hand, the armies don't have enough left for 3 more days of that kind of fighting. If you look here, everything down here is optional. And this is optional, which means they're not going to be coming in. There's nothing there. I've already taken 1 optional unit by mistake, right? Anyway, up it goes.